All right, this is episode 1 of We've Got Your Number, a little side project of the Nights On, Lights Off podcast. I'm Will from the Game Escape channel here with Jay Shy of Shin Megami Talks, and tonight we are going to discuss the best games with the number 1 in the title. Jay, what are you thinking for games with 1?
The first thing that pops up in my head is Final Fight.
Final Fight. Exactly.
Final Fight 1 on the Game Boy Advance, I think it was called.
Yes.
Yep.
That was the first one that came up for me, Final Fight 1. Much like the Metroid Zero mission, I think, from the previous episode, this was basically Final Fight just redone for the Game Boy Advance.
Yeah, it was a really strong port. It was really good. It even added if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if it was the Japanese version that only had this, but you can play as Alpha Guy and Alpha Cody from Street Fighter in that game.
Oh, yes.
So, and they both still had their animations very clean, surprisingly.
Yeah, I thought, back in the day, a lot of the Game Boy Advanced remakes felt kind of impressive. And this one was, I think a good example of that genre. Mm-hmm. So that was one that immediately came to mind. And then, as I was kind of going through games with 1 in the title, and I'm talking about like 1, not, games with a specific year in them where it's 1, like we're going to treat, say, a year like 1943 as,
or Battlefield 1.
Yeah, Battlefield 1, which actually I didn't have that initially, but Battlefield 1, was that the recent one that took place during World War I?
Yeah, that was what was that, like 3 years ago, maybe 4?
Yes. That was not a bad game.
It was. Oh, okay.
It was very multiplayer focused, but it's had a very short campaign from all different parts of the war, and I thought the campaigns that it gave you were pretty interesting. I think the first one you were playing as these like Italian kind of special combat forces invading Austria, and you were essentially like a mech. You had this very primitive armor, suit of armor, and you had to kind of raid an Austrian position in the mountains. I thought that was cool. Wow. There was like a Lawrence of Arabia level where, at the Ottoman and British part of the war. And then I seem to recall a stage where you're actually trying to like take over a Zeppelin, and you're fighting and shooting, the Germans in the Zeppelin.
See, I love levels that involve Zeppelins because it just reminds me of Rocketeer for some reason.
I was going to say, are there any other games besides those two with a Zeppelin as a featured moment?
Maybe I never played this game, but maybe because I think it's the same era. There was a game called The Saboteur.
Okay.
On the 360, maybe, I don't know, or Wolfenstein. I mean, Wolfenstein's got to have a Zeppelin in it.
I feel like there was a Zeppelin in one of the Metal Slugs.
Yeah, was there? Probably, towards the end. If you make it that far.
they were sending everything at you in those games. So I think at some point there might have been a Zeppelin-like
somewhere.
Vehicle.
Yeah.
So I didn't think of that, but in a list that doesn't have a lot of great games, I think that is an interesting one. As much as I hate to put an EA game in there.
Battlefield 1.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. Wasn't bad. It was an interesting one. Some other ones that I found: Ratchet and Clank All for One on the PS3.
Oh wow.
I like, I didn't like Ratchet and Clank games as they were coming out, but I've gained an appreciation for them after the PS4 and PS5, like the most recent ones. And I went back and played some of the previous ones. I'm going to admit that this particular one does not stand out for me in any particular way.
I don't think I've ever. I've never played a Ratchet and Clank game, and I probably should because I like adventure games, and there was something about Ratchet and Clank at the time that just never appealed to me. But I think as I got older, now I'm just like, man, I really want to play a good adventure game, and I think going back to the beginning of one of those games would probably be a good bet.
Yeah, they all seem to have this kind of 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, like North American cartoon aesthetic to them, which for me was like beyond the time that I ever watched cartoons. But going back now, like I can appreciate what made those games interesting. So another one, and this is a pick that is, for me, a kind of nostalgic one, but I don't know how good it is. It's Star Wars Episode 1 Racer.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, which I thought was very cool. Like when that movie came out, it was a big deal. And myself and a lot of friends were consuming all kinds of Star Trek media. Or sorry, Star Wars media. I could get killed for that, for mixing them up. But I liked the pod racing in the movie, even though I thought Anakin and was kind of an annoying character. But to play it in video game form was very cool. So I don't know if you were a fan of Episode 1.
I was a fan of Episode 1 when I played it on the Nintendo 64.
Yes,
that was
where
my
I played
first. That was my first experience with it, and I was just like, "Oh my god, this is F-Zero. This is exactly what I've been looking for." And it actually has a different weight to it. F-Zero never felt like it had weight. The pod racing game definitely felt like it had some sort of weight to the racing, and I love the fact that I like when my racing games are kind of hard to master because there's like this sense of accomplishment. Oh God, I'm gonna quote EA right here. Pride and accomplishment. There's a sense of accomplishment when you get good at those kind of games, and I always enjoyed that stuff.
Yeah, and that game, it had its challenges because you had the uneven terrain. If you're playing it on the N64, I felt like dealing with the N64 analog stick was not easy when you really needed precision, like in a racer like that. So you really needed to work with that game to get good at it. I think it was actually better on the Dreamcast, as I had a friend who had a Dreamcast, but I didn't play it enough to say for sure. But I would imagine graphically that was the way to play it. Couple of other things. So I'm going to put a game that a lot of people talked about, like when I was doing some research for this little mini episode, but I've never played it, and I don't know if you can play it. It seems to be abandonware, but this game is called The Operative: No One Lives Forever.
Oh, it's such a great game.
Have you played it?
Oh yes, No One Lives Forever is fantastic. It's the female James Bond game.
Okay,
it's so good. It's I at the time when I played it, this was what year? I don't even remember what year that was.
I think it was like 2000.
Was it 2000? Because I do remember I was still in school, so I think I was in high school or middle school or something. And I remember when I played it, I was like, this game is just GoldenEye, but it has a lot more options because it was on the PC. So you were able to do more. And it was such a great game. Like you can tackle missions in different ways. Back then it was groundbreaking to have a primary objective and secondary objectives, and if you did something in your secondary, it'll open up a new objective. Like that stuff is so cool back then. Now it's like, oh, we have that everywhere now.
Yeah, when I was looking at it, I think it also came out on the PS2.
Oh, there was a port on the PS2. There, you're right. There was a port.
And this was a game that totally escaped me. But when you're looking at lists of highly rated games, with the number one in the title, this like topped all the lists. So maybe it's great. I couldn't figure out a way to buy it or play it though. quickly, like
It's a
online anywhere.
That's a great game. It's a
Okay, so maybe
good game.
that's going to be up there. The other two that I found, I'll start with this one, and this is cheating a little bit. Half-Life 2, Episode 1. And I could have, and our episode for number 2 is going to be quite the discussion, because again, we're literally going to have every sequel ever made as fair game for that discussion. So I put this one here because
That is kind of
Half-Life,
cheating.
yeah, is a great series.
I've only played the first one. I've only played the first one. I don't know. I can't even say about the other two. Or wait, was there? There's only Half-Life 2. What, episode 1 and 2, right?
That's what I thought. Yeah, I'm going to admit I'm not a huge, not a huge Half-Life person, but I want to say that I had like the orange box.
Right. Yeah, I
That
remember that.
So I think that both were on there, or the sequel, like episode 2 was definitely on there.
Okay.
And I think that's where I want to say I experienced 1 and 2 there. I don't know that I'm qualified. Like, I appreciated Half-Life. I really did.
Same.
It wasn't, but it wasn't one of those games where I was like obsessed with it.
Right.
And I have not played it since I was playing the orange box and kind of just getting into serious PC gaming in the mid 2000s. But I feel like it probably wouldn't have made, of all the sequels, I don't know that it would have been in the discussion in that video, so I put it here. And the other one, also kind of cheating, Ys Books 1 and 2.
Oh, I'm always gonna go Ys.
Yeah.
I'm always going to pick Ys. Always. Oh, Ys is fantastic.
It is to me, that game is a classic. It is.
Yeah.
And I don't know, people who are younger, I think it strikes them as very weird with kind of like the bumping to attack mechanic.
Yeah. A lot of people don't like that mechanic because you ricochet all over the place. But I think there's something about Ys, especially book 1 and 2. There's something about those games that just, how do I explain? There's a level of joy that you can't get in another game, because I think people have gotten to a point now when they play video games is that they're looking for challenge because everything is so easy. So when they finally find that challenge, they start looking back at the older games, and Ys is one of those games. You look back at it and you're just gonna have fun with it.
Yeah, yeah, it has an exuberance. I think what we should probably specify is this Ys Books 1 and 2 has been released on more consoles than we can count. So
Yeah.
which version are you thinking of, like when we're
The
placing
first
this on the list of greats?
the first two that pop into my head, of course, I'm gonna bring up the PSP one. Is it PSP or is it PS Vita? It was one of those. I
think it was
played on.
PSP, definitely. The
Was it the
remake
PSP?
was,
Okay.
yeah.
So PSP, you have that one, and then you have the original. I'm gonna say tested because I was at a friend's house when I played it. It was on the. Which one is is it the PC-88 or is it the what was the one that we were discussing when we were shopping online for video games? The big PC engine computer tower.
The
thing?
MSX thing?
No.
Or the
No, PC computer. I don't remember. It was one of those.
PCFX?
Yes, thank you. God, I almost died. The PCFX. That's the one. I tested it at a friend's house on a PCFX, I think.
Really? I didn't know that it came out on the PCF.
I think it was that. I played it. It was either that or it was probably another Ys game. But I did play an Ys game that had the ricocheting, bouncing around on the PCFX. It was one of those.
I think, Ys Books 1, like it definitely started its life on the early Japanese computers.
Yeah.
So it could have been the MSX, the PC-88. I think it was on I think I actually have it for the Master System. And those versions are, they're a little primitive. But when I think of Ys Books 1 and 2, I'm thinking of the TurboGrafx CD version.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And,
Those are good ones.
that one, and then the PSP/PC remake, which is awesome.
Yep.
So I'm always going back to the TurboGrafx version because I think if you played that in the early 90s, just the cutscenes, the crystal clear, beautiful
Yep.
music, and then, like you were saying, the exuberant gameplay, just the fun that it gave you it was unlike anything I had played at the time,
Yeah.
even though I could tell, like, oh, this is kind of simple. Like, if you're coming to it from, say, an SNES RPG,
Hmm.
you were like, oh, okay, it's not taking up the full screen. It's a little weird. But when you add in all those other elements, and again, I think it's that CD music. It
Oh my
was,
gosh.
yeah,
Yes.
one of the best soundtracks in gaming.
Yeah.
Like, you could just hear it. I could hear it now.
Yeah.
So I think it's a strong contender for best game with a 1 in it. Although
Yeah.
I suppose we might get some pushback because Final Fight, again, great game, great version,
Yeah.
and I can't think of any other game. I feel like I'm missing a game with 1 in it, but these were just the ones that stood out.
Yeah, I've been trying to think of another one that has the number 1 in it, and the only one that comes up in my head is actually 3 numbers, so it doesn't count. And it'll be the Wonderful 101.
Oh yes,
That's the only one that pops into my head, and it doesn't count because it's a
doesn't count.
hundred. It's 101.
Yeah, and like, just to be clear, like, for the listeners, like, we're not going backwards. Like, why aren't we saying Super Mario Brothers 1? Because, like, that wasn't actually in the title.
Title, right?
So
Right.
we're not doing that. It has to have the 1 either spelled out or the number 1. So I think these are all that I could find. So do we give it to Final Fight 1? Do we give it to Ys Books 1 and 2?
Yeah, I
I
kind of
got to go
forgot what
Ys personally.
I kind of forgot what the other ones were.
So we've
I
got
gotta
Final
go.
Fight 1, Ratchet and Clank, all 4-1, which we could have put in the 4 category, but we're going to go
Oh, and No
1.
One Lives Forever.
Yeah, No One Lives Forever, Episode 1 Racer, Half-Life 2, Episode 1.
Yeah, I gotta go Ys
Yeah.
because the thing with Ys games is, especially with, I'm just gonna say all of them, is that, but in particular we're talking about book 1 and 2. Book 1 is that game felt like a journey. There's not
Yes.
a lot of games that feel like that. There's some in that time period that felt like that, but that game felt like a journey. And every time you would play it, although it was difficult, you always felt like you were getting better at the game, and you would edge closer and closer to reaching the climax of, what's his name's, like, end story.
Yes.
So
Addles. Yeah.
yeah, at all. And you just, there's not a lot of games that are like that.
Yeah, and the other thing that I have to give Ys credit for, and it started right in that first game, was this was a tried and true RPG, but it was an arrangement of the mechanics in such a way that it felt like you got into the game faster, and even though you had the journey, it progressed in just a quicker way than a typical turn-based RPG.
Yeah.
And I think that's carried through the entire series to this very day. It's like it is a pick-up-and-play RPG that nonetheless has all of the trappings of what makes the genre great.
Yep.
So,
And they're and they're still making that game fantastic. It's probably hands down the only series I actually take a vacation from work just to play through.
oh man, I probably should do that, but I can't say that. Like, I'll admit I have not gotten through 8. I'm probably halfway through that, and I have 9, the Monstrum Nox, but I have not really gotten.
Monster Nox isn't bad. It's a good game, but 8, to me, in my opinion, was a masterpiece.
It was
8
very
was
good.
8 is hands down the best one, in my opinion. I've played a lot of them, like Ultim Felghana and all those other Ys games, especially now that they're ported to the PC. It made it easier to play. But Ys 8 is on a different level.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think it's like whatever engine that Falcom uses today to produce really all of their RPGs, whether it's the Cold Steel series, whether
Hmm.
it's Tokyo Xanadu or this, like whatever that engine is, it's a very, very good way to represent their style of RPG.
Yeah.
And I think Ease 8 is probably, the best example of them putting that engine to work. So I'm with you on that, but I think we will crown Ease Books 1 and 2 as the best game that we can think of with 1 in the title. And now it's up to the listeners to, in the comments section, tell us why we're right or why we're wrong.